With Walpurgis being right around the corner, I figured now would be a good time to set aside all this talk about Rimuru and finally focus on something a little bit different. An introduction to the unique cast of characters that make up what's known as the 10 Great Demon Lords. Not only will I be covering the details regarding their rise to the top of the food chain, but I'll also include other spoiler-free bits and pieces of who they are. Things that weren't quite shown in the anime. So let's continue with our Tensura Explained series and take a closer look at these Demon Lords and the even more powerful True Demon Lords. But first, this video is sponsored by Red Shoes, an upcoming high-quality roguelike action mobile game based on the 2019 movie Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs. I know this isn't the typical anime-inspired game that I usually promote, but as a big fan of roguelikes, I thought some of you may be interested in this. It's a fast-paced and easy-to-learn game in which every immersive experience differs from the last, especially since there's multiple different modes to play. The roguelike mode provides the typical dungeon crawl experience. You'll run through unique levels as you defeat monsters, gain skills, and progressively get stronger. World mode provides more of a never-ending survival type experience. Continuously hunt monsters on a massive map in order to earn new items and gear. Co-op mode allows you to clear waves of monsters with your friends, then boss fight mode puts you up against a very challenging enemy to see how much damage you can do. All of which can be played offline if you just want to level up and run things solo. So if you want to check out this new mobile roguelike experience, then be sure to use the link in the description to pre-register for it today. Anyone who does will be given the in-game rewards of 10,000 gold and Arthur. But now, let's get back to the video. There's a very big difference between a Demon Lord and a True Demon Lord. One is just a social position in which any capable person or monster can declare or be given, while the other is a formal stage of evolution that coincides with one of the ultimate forms of existence. So, when talking about the 10 Great Demon Lords that we'll be seeing at Walpurgis, it's important to know that not even half are true awakened Demon Lords like how Milim or Rimuru are. Some are still seeds hoping to complete their evolution, while others are a holy being or species that simply can't become true Demon Lords. The one thing in common between all of them though is that each possess a level of strength worth noticing. Every Demon Lord carries a threat level that's at least at the S rank or above, placing each in a class that's known to be more than capable of leveling a small nation. As for the difference in power for those above that, well, let's just say that the scale isn't even fathomable. There's a significant disparity in power between those who are at the top and those who aren't. Sure, some of them could be fairly equal, but there's others like Guy and Milim who simply make the rest pale in comparison. As for why those weaker Demon Lords are even called that in the first place, well, that's mainly because of the way that it's seen as a social position. You see, in the world of Tensura, there's more than one way to become a Demon Lord. There's the evolution approach that I talked about last video, then the extremely more risky social approach which I'll briefly talk about here. To put it simply, if a being like, let's say, Ramiris isn't capable of acquiring a Demon Lord seed, then that means becoming a true Demon Lord isn't a possibility for them. Their only other options are to then either declare themselves one, or have their power be recognized by an existing Demon Lord. The former is certainly an option that literally any monster or person can do, but the moment that declaration is made is the moment that that power will be tested. Either by a rival Demon Lord, their closest subordinates, or even a whole nation of humans trying to kill you. Now, the other option definitely isn't any easier, but it doesn't put you in a position to be hunted by what's literally the strongest beings in the world. Instead, you simply have to gain recognition. Whether that comes from killing another Demon Lord, or simply putting on a display of power that impresses existing ones, the end goal here is to gain their approval. Only then can you be nominated to join their ranks. So, now that you know the difference between a Demon Lord and a true Demon Lord, let's go through every person that's currently part of the 10 Great Demon Lords, the existing council that we'll be seeing at Walpurgis. I won't be showing any spoilers, but I will be talking about details that didn't make it into the anime. So, first we have the Platinum Devil Leon Cromwell, a self-proclaimed Demon Lord who ascended himself all the way from the lowly status of human almost 200 years ago. As the most recent addition to the Council of Demon Lords, his rise to such a standing was one that not many had been able to see in quite a few centuries. Mainly because people don't usually declare themselves to be a Demon Lord like the way that he did. Remember, not only do you need an immense level of power to back up your claim of being as strong as a Demon Lord, but you also take on the risk of attracting the wrath of the other Demon Lords who you're essentially challenging. So, when Leon had done exactly that, the world was shocked to see him actually have the latent power to back it up. It was a very rare feat in which he alone could accomplish, a display of power that granted him the Demon Lord title permanently. As for what exactly happened, Well, there was a time 200 years ago when Leon had begun to amass a large army of Majin. It's not like he was doing so for any nefarious purposes, but it was more like these magic-born creatures found his charm to be alluring. So, once a large enough army had been established, Leon simply decided to declare himself the lord of the territory he was in. An action that did well to anger the nearest demon lord known as the Cursed Lord. The instant this Cursed Lord heard of this news, he immediately declared war on Leon and set out with his armies to crush him, not once considering that perhaps he could lose. But to his surprise, this Cursed Lord quickly found his forces to be completely annihilated by Leon alone. There wasn't a single person other than Leon who had acted to repel the invading forces of this already established demon lord, making this one of the rare occasions where a demon lord had made their debut through a pure display of power. Of course, he could just have taken the safer approach and gained the backing of 2 other demon lords, but I guess for someone like Leon, the more aggressive option was easier. I mean, riling up an opposing demon lord then fending them off in battle was certainly a valid method of recognition as well. In any case, it was after this that Leon would continue to make himself more powerful, not only by honing his current set of skills, but also by expanding his sphere of influence with some very notable allies. That said, he certainly wasn't a stranger to any disputes either. As a person who wasn't too fond of Clayman himself, the two were always working to undermine the other's plans. Sure, they may not show their mutual disdain to the eyes of the public, but everyone knew that they were always doing what they could to keep track of the other's movements. Now, when it comes to his relationship with the other demon lords, there is a bit of history that Leon was explained to have shared with Ramiris back at the end of Season 1, but I think revealing that information will spoil elements of Leon's character that they're saving for later. So, the next demon lord to be introduced after Leon was none other than the Marionette master himself, Clayman, another self-proclaimed demon lord who made his entrance a century or so prior to Leon. Since he's one of the few demon lords that we actually know quite a bit about though, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you about his powers of manipulation or desire to scheme his way to the top. Something you may not know instead though is just how refined of a thinker he really is. I mean, even Rimuru had come to acknowledge his potential genius when he heard how he treated his territory's economy. As one of the only demon lords who allowed free and legal commerce, it was pretty clear that Clayman knew what he was doing when it came to running extremely large operations. He had even managed to build trade relations with the Eastern Empire. So there's definitely more to his tactical brilliance than just deception and manipulation. Moving on to the trio of demon lords from Clayman's personal summit, it's the duo of Frey and Carrion that have a fairly interesting origin. You see, back when the world was in a constant state of conflict, there were numerous characters who would declare themselves demon lords only to be taken out shortly after. It was an era of pandemonium referred to as the Great World War, a fabled event that's said to occur only every 500 years. So, with this one being 400 years ago, Carrion and Frey were 2 of the emerging survivors allowed to join the infamous Demon Lord Club. They were the first 2 of the newest generation, followed by Clayman and Leon. As for the older generations, well, let's just say that they've been around for at least 2 world wars or longer. In any case, first we have the Beastmaster Carrion, the leader of the Lycanthropes and ruler of the Beast Kingdom Eurasania. Over the past several centuries as this nation's ruler, numerous battles were fought which had then served to expand his influence, eventually earning him respect from both the Cursed Lord and Milim herself. So, with 2 current demon lords endorsing his power, Carrion now had enough backing to solidify his position as a demon lord permanently. Yes, Leon did have some objection to this, but he wasn't going to protest it since he knew that Carrion had earned his spot properly. It was a perspective of a fellow demon lord that Carrion also had towards Leon. It's not like he was really fond of Leon as a person, but his keen eye for powerful people made him accept Leon for the power that he had. So when he saw that Leon was constantly increasing his own nation's forces, Carrion's instincts made him feel obliged to do the same. He wasn't really nervous of an impending attack, but he did feel a natural compulsion to fortify his kingdom to the point that any threats could be easily neutralized. It became this constant desire to accumulate as much strength as possible. That's why when Clayman had offered a proposal that gave him exactly that, he was more than willing to take part in whatever devious plan that he had come up with. Keep in mind though that this wasn't with the intent to do something fully evil like how Clayman was planning. It was more like an additional precaution that he thought would help to keep the other demon lords in check. You see, Carrion wasn't quite the same man that he was 400 years ago. Back then, he really only declared himself a demon lord for the sake of acquiring more power. As time went on though, that desire for power, which was only for the sake of being strong, eventually shifted towards being for the sake of his people. Time had turned this power-hungry beastmaster into this increasingly benevolent king. Now, moving on to the Sky Queen Frey. Not only is she the absolute ruler of the Harpies and their kingdom Volbrosia, but she also possesses a level of cunning and intelligence that makes her much more of a tactical leader than even Clayman. Unlike how Clayman often becomes blinded by his own overconfidence, Frey has observational skills that allow her to see straight through anyone who would try to deceive her. They're not the type of skills that are gifted to her by the world, but instead simply a natural talent to understand a person's true intentions, making her the only person at the Demon Lord Summit that Clayman felt he needed to be careful of. In regards to the kingdom that she runs, its Harpy society is well known for being extremely classist. Any creature with wings would always get preferential treatment over those without. It didn't matter how strong of a Majin you were, because if you didn't have wings then you were simply seen as a lesser member of society. When it comes to Frey herself, not only are her skills in aerial combat outmatched by very few, but her proficiency with magic is nothing to be scoffed at either. Combine this with her intrinsic ability to negate any flight-based magic, and she'll pretty much always have the advantage over any creature that doesn't have physical wings. That's why as a kingdom built high into the top of a mountain, their only natural enemy is the calamity-level monster Charybdis. In fact, this was actually the whole reason why Frey had even went with Milim to the Demon Lord Summit in the first place. Just like how Carrion was looking out for his own nation, so too was Frey looking out for hers. Because she was now both a Demon Lord and a queen, she knew that she could no longer afford to lead her armies into battle like how she usually did. She understood that she now carried the responsibility to keep her people safe. So, even though she didn't like being the one who followed Milim and cleaned up her mess, she didn't really have a problem doing it so long as it meant keeping this powerful ally close. It was really nothing more than just an inconvenient byproduct, one that had come with the rule of strictly prohibiting herself from entering battle. Only if her victory was 100% assured would Frey ever even dare to consider placing herself into the picture. That was just the way that she worked now. Now, despite the next Demon Lord being the destroyer Milim, to talk about her would require a video of its own. I mean, there's quite a bit more to this special S-rank Dragonborn than just incomparable power. So instead we'll just skip ahead to the Fairy Queen Ramiris, one of the more powerful Demon Lords from the older generation. When it comes to how she became what she is now, well, her story brings us all the way back to the time when Milim had first awakened as a true Demon Lord. A time thousands of years ago when Milim's rage had threatened the very existence of all life entirely. With her newfound power spiraling out of control, Guy was forced to step in and try to subdue her in a battle that would last exactly a week. There was no decisive victor by the end of it, but the fight did come to an end when Milim was eventually able to regain her senses, a result that was only achieved due to the efforts and sacrifice of Ramiris. As a very high-level leader of the spirits, Ramiris had chosen to sacrifice her own power in exchange for the neutralization of Milim's rage. But having been exposed to such intense auras from both demon and dragon, Ramiris' core had ended up becoming corrupted, thus changing her very existence into something different. So, not only was she drained of whatever force had made her so strong, but she was also turned into this continuously self-resurrecting fairy, a reincarnation of her former self that only possessed a small fraction of the power that she used to have, all because she was the Demon Lord who truly believed in promoting balance in the world. Of course, she wasn't a Demon Lord back then, but this was the incident that had gained her the recognition of one. It was here that the world was introduced to what's now known as the first generation of Demon Lords. So, alongside Milim and Ramiris, we also have the Demon Lord whose goal is to find the farthest reaches of power, the absolute ruler of the frozen continent to the north, and the oldest and strongest of all the Demon Lords, Guy Crimson. Now, as you'd expect from the only Demon Lord who's, well, actually a demon, this Lord of Darkness tends to fill his ranks with all sorts of greater demons and archdemons, some of which are even powerful enough to be Demon Lords themselves. Even so, the difference in power between them and Guy is so large that none would even dare to speak freely while in his presence. To even display any sort of emotion without his express permission was essentially the same thing as asking for their immediate death. In fact, if an opposing Demon Lord was to start attacking Guy right in front of their face, not a single one would move, since to worry for Guy's safety would be to disrespect his power. And that was the most grave mistake that any person could ever make. As for how it is he gained all this power, well, that takes us back to long before he'd even awakened as a true demon lord. You see, Guy was first summoned to the world as an unnamed archdemon, but more than that, he was also one of the 7 primal demons that had a color associated with them, his of course being the color rouge. Now, the reason why he'd been summoned in the first place was specifically to fulfill the wishes of the powerless human that summoned him, a petty wish involving the destruction of the nation his summoner was currently at war with. Guy had no issue making that wish come true, but he immediately followed it up by wiping out his summoner's nation as well. It was a feat of pure carnage and destruction that not only earned him the name of Guy, but also allowed him to awaken into his new class of true demon lord. Since Guy already considered himself to be the strongest though, an evolution like this didn't really mean much to him. He was more so interested in the ultimate skills that could potentially come with it. That's why he tends to hold anyone who possesses one in very high regard. In any case, it was Guy, Milim, and Ramiris who would go on to represent the first generation, the initial group of demon lords that would lay the foundations for all the others. So, soon after they had established themselves as the world's pillars of strength, a second generation would eventually emerge to join them. First, there was the holy giant Daggrull, a being so imbued with what's known as the holy element that it wasn't even possible for a demon lord's seed to take root in his body, making it impossible for him to ever become a true demon lord. Despite that being the case though, Daggrull's raw power as the protector of the gates to heaven was more than enough to earn him recognition from the other demon lords. The next to join after him was the ancient vampire who I'll simply refer to as the Queen of Nightmares, a true demon lord whose position was currently being occupied by the bloody lord Roy Valentine. There isn't really much to say about who either of them are, but apparently Roy had taken over for this Queen of Nightmares approximately 1500 years ago. Then finally we have the last of the second generation, Dino, a fallen angel whose strength made him more than capable of commanding an empire, but never actually got around to doing it due to his complete lack of interest. He was simply a powerful individual too lazy to do anything about it. So rather than amass an army or acquire territory, Dino instead just tends to be a bystander, usually spending the majority of his time sleeping. But anyway, that's every member of the second generation, a group of more veteran demon lords who have been around for more than a few great wars now. So just on that fact alone, they're far more experienced than any of the demon lords to come after them. Well, most of them anyway. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that I've got for today. If you liked what you saw, then be sure to leave a like or let me know in the comments. Now, before I go, a huge thanks to Red Shoes once again for sponsoring this video. If you're looking for a new roguelike to try on mobile, then be sure to use the link in the description to pre-register for it today. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!